Jewish Insights with Justin Pines on JBS is made possible in part by the clubs at Pearl River, New York, luxury rental communities for ages 55 and better, and the B.L. Manger Foundation.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Insights. In the Talmud, in Tractate Shabbat on the 31st page, Rava asks the question, what happens when you die? And there he says, we go to the pearly gates, we face our moment of judgment, and the first question we are asked when one dies, God forbid anyone should die, did you conduct business with emunah? Did you conduct business with faith? I think, if I may, that he's saying more than, did you not steal? Did you give an appropriate percentage to charity? Those types of questions. I think it's more a question around, did you carry your life the way you did your business as a person of faith, as a person that reflects Jewish values? And so today I'm very excited to explore the topic of the relationship between Torah and business. Why is it so important? How should we educate the next generation to think about being successful in both business and Torah, not as mutually separate, but as the same thing? And so my guest today is Dr. Noam Wasserman. He currently serves as Dean of Yeshiva University's Syms School of Business and has been professor at the University of Southern California and at Harvard Business School. He has written 2 best-selling and award-winning books. One is The Founder's Dilemma, Anticipating and Avoiding the Pitfalls That Can Sink a Startup. The second is Life is a Startup, What Founders Can Teach Us About Making Choices and Managing Change. And I learned today, I did not know this, I'm selfishly probably most excited about this, although I'm very excited about the other 2 books as well. He has a book out there called Zemmer of the Week, Bencher, which grew out of conversations in his own home around matching the Torah portion of the week with songs we could sing at the Sabbath table. And he has basically an index here where he has each portion of the week and suggested a song to sing at the table that goes with it and why. And so if you're looking to add more meaning to understanding the weekly portion or more meaning to understanding the weekly singing that you're doing at your table, I recommend checking out this book, which I'm so thrilled that I just got a copy of. Thank you. He is a fellow Harvard and Penn guy, like me. He has both a PhD and an MBA from Harvard Business School, and he has undergraduate degrees from Wharton and engineering at Penn. I remember my friends who did dual degrees at Penn. That is not a joke. Those were my smartest friends, and they were very impressive. They did not sleep in college, so I can put myself into, imagine that. I couldn't have done it, but I can imagine it. And perhaps you know him best, and he's kind of made the news recently because he is now also a fellow Ramaz guy. Dr. Wasserman was recently named head of school at Ramaz, the modern Orthodox preparatory school on Manhattan's Upper East Side. And let's just start by saying welcome and Mazal Tov on your new appointment. Wow.
Well, thank you, Justin. Sounds like early on I was the one who was leading you through each of those schools, but then you led me on the Ramaz side. You were ahead of me on that one, so I'll have to watch for where you go next so I know where I should go next.
Exactly. We have spots on television for you here when you're ready. That's great. And you know, Ramaz is a place very close to our heart. I worked there as Mashgiach Ruchani, Director of Character Development for 3 years. My wife is an alum. Some of my best friends are Ramaz alum. And so it's a place that is special in our hearts. We're very excited for the community. We're very excited for you to join. But before we get to Ramaz, which we'll get to, let's just talk about you. Place us for our audience a little bit if this is their first time meeting you. Who are you? How do we get to where we are today?
Okay, so I'm not sure how much gory detail you want me to get into or how far back to go. Even.
Only the most scandalous stuff, please. Thank you.
Headline grabbers.
Yes.
So started life, grew up in LA. Mm-hmm. Grew up a block away from a high school there called ULA, Yeshiva University of Los Angeles High School. During high school, became very taken with computer engineering. Essentially, computer science and engineering became my life. And so when I was coming into college, after doing a year in Israel, I went to Yeshivat Tel Avim. The given to me was I was going to do engineering. Along the way, though, as you were just highlighting, Penn has a bit of a culture of duals, being able to bring together 2 things that usually aren't combined, but together might make a pretty magical combination. And so I tried out a couple of them, and the one that I found the most intriguing was to bring together both business and engineering. And so they had a program that was called the Management and Technology Program.
Yes. MNT.
Yes. Decided to see if the school would be okay with my becoming an M&Ter.
Yeah.
And because of that, they actually tax you You could either say that I was slow to finish college, or that to do the 2 degrees, I had to spend 5 years there, but ended up spending 5 years at Penn to be able to finish the both of them. I went out and worked. Like, I was not even thinking about academia at that point. I never thought about where does a professor come from, would I want to be one, or anything like that. But I went and was working in first in consulting, doing consulting that brings together both the business and the technology. First redesign the organization or the process, and then implement the technology. So I loved being able to bring together those disparate pieces. Cool. Being able to see essentially the whole that is going to be a lot stronger because you have your feet in both camps.
Okay.
So I did that for 5 years, did it longer than I typically would, because I knew that even after 5 years of undergrad that there was lots that I hadn't learned about, that I wanted to go back to school.
Sure.
And in particular, that I would want to go back and get my MBA. Typically, you would do that after 2 or 3 years, but, and this is where I don't know how much you want us to get into the dual career kinds of things and a variety of things on more the personal side.
Sure, feel free to share.
But my wife, who's had just finished med school, she was heading into residency. We ended up sticking around for 5 years in D.C. That's where we had moved to there to be able to have her finish residency.
Sure.
And it turned into one of the recurring themes also of my life, and also a lot of the teaching and a lot of the mentoring that we do is around how to take things that seem to be setbacks, or at least not the plan that you had crafted, and be able to make it into a gamzula tova. How can this also help us get stronger? And so if I would have rushed back after 2 or 3 years, I wouldn't have experienced a whole slew of things that, by having to stick around for 5 years, it was very much a bracha, very much a blessing that I was doing that. It included the last 3 years of it doing entrepreneurial stuff. Being able to found a practice, being able to build it for 3 years, growing it to 19 people, like a very rich set of experiences that I would have neglected if I had just rushed off to go back for my MBA. When the handcuffs came off, when she was done, applied to, was taking a look at schools and decided I had to go to the one that was the most different from my natural style. My natural style when I'm learning is to observe, to absorb, and not to throw myself in. And the school that is the best at forcing you out of your shell is Harvard Business School. The case study methodology, 50% of every grade on the semester is how much you contributed to the discussion and things like that. And so applied to HBS, and they called my bluff and let me in. And so we figured we're going to go to Boston for 2 years. My wife got a great job there, working at MIT Medical. They have an HMO for the campus. She was going to be in the OBGYN department there. And we figured for 2 years we can be able to do it. We also, at that point, had our 4th kid who was on the way. But we figured for 2 years we can make do with a 1,000 square foot apartment, and then we'll be going back down to the DC area was the plan at that point.
Sure.
There's also going to be a recurring theme about man plans, God laughs, and you have to watch for where Yad Hashem, the hand of God, is pointing you in a different direction than that. During the time at HBS, I worked in venture capital. I developed a lot of relationships in the entrepreneurial sector to be able to build on the things that I was doing. But I also had a couple of professors who nudged me in the direction of thinking about academia. And did my due diligence on it, investigated, is this anything I should be thinking about? It was at that point also I was going to be class of 99. And for those who weren't alive back then, that was the gold rush. That was like the dot-com boom. That was when everyone was rushing out to Silicon Valley to be able to to make the gold. And here I'm thinking about going back into school for several years. To become an academic, you have to be able to get a PhD first, and then that's going to be several years away from it. So that also led to, as I was going to my devil's advocate mentors and telling them, tell me why not to do this, and a bunch of it was emerging that all the reasons they gave not to do it actually resonated with me in the positive direction instead. And so that led to some of the difficult conversations with the wife, with the parents, and things like that not going to grab the gold. I'm going to walk out the PhD graduate, the MBA graduation door, and walk in the PhD orientation door and go without for an unknown number of years that are coming up. But I had done enough of the due diligence on it to understand that this is where, if I can have an impact on the world through both the knowledge creation, the research, and also the knowledge dissemination, the teaching, that that was the kind of impact that I wanted to be able to have. And so ended up, the 2 years became another 3 years for the PhD, became another year for a postdoc. With that incremental growing horizon, never made sense to uproot from the apartment. And so 6 years in, we are still in the 1,000 square foot apartment. Number 6 kid is coming up, and things like that. So we had the most over-tapped need for space. But then when we finally knew where we would be, I ended up joining the faculty at Harvard and ended up being on the faculty there for 13 years. Then we could finally move to a part of town that had houses. We had 4x the space at that point,
Right.
and a bunch of other things. And in the end, we were able to raise 8 kids in the new place there.
Wow.
Spent those 13 years at HBS, did a bunch of research that tapped a lot of the things I had experienced on what are the early decisions that founders make that tend to go awry, that tend to heighten the failure rate within startups, that tend to lead to a bunch of the problems that, and even what are those problems to begin with, but then how do we back up into the decisions that led to them, and how can we then be able to educate the next generation about how to make those decisions better. And this is where some of the things I assume that you're going to want to get into about how my lens on it, a lot of it comes from 2,000 years worth of Jewish wisdom. Right. And so how to be able to see the unique things that leads us to, how to be able to integrate that into both the analyses that we do, but also the prescriptions that come up. That was in some ways the inception of the bringing together the disparate worlds we talked about with engineering and business,
Right.
and how those can form like a greater whole. Being able to bring together Torah and business, and being able to have the unique insights that both come from the 2,000 years worth of wisdom, but also from my bleeding edge, current research on founders. What are the additional things that helps us be able to understand that I can then go back to the Gemara, go back to the Talmud,
Right.
and the Torah, and be able to see, I didn't even notice that before, but now I'm seeing the human dynamics and I'm seeing a lot more of the richness
Right.
of it because of having studied founders. And so I ended up doing that was at Harvard for almost 2 decades worth.
Right.
Then went back to LA for 3 years. Ended up first, my parents were at the stage where my father was going to be retiring. They were thinking about next stages, my being able to be there with them. I got a chance to go to davening with my father for the first time in decades on a regular basis, to have dinner with my parents, a bunch. And also at USC, they said, come found a center around your founder research, rather than it being a solo act. You bring a lot more resources and people to it. And so to be able to scale that and be able to enrich it, that was what led to the 3 years there. And then Rabbi Berman, the president of YU, came calling. And at first, he said, we were looking for a new dean. Are you interested? And I said, no. And essentially, I'd never envisioned, just like I'd never envisioned, becoming a professor. Where do they come from or anything like that? Never aspired to doing it. But as I got to know a little bit more about the path, about what they were looking for, about what the needs were going to be in the future, that was when I started appreciating this zigzag path that Hashem had taken me on, putting a lot of the pieces in place that unexpectedly were coalescing into being able to set the table for that. And so now it's been almost 6 years that I've been at YU and doing a bunch of things with the great business school team that we have there, and putting new things in place for the curriculum, developing the next generation of the faculty, and a whole variety of other things that we can get into if you want.
Beautiful. All right. A few reactions, and then I'll get to some questions. One, your note about the gift of accidentally staying a little bit further out before you went back to business school just resonates so deeply. I remember when I was in law school, the number of people who went straight through or after a year versus the people who spent 2, 3, 7, 10, 15 years in the field, it was like miles apart in terms of how much the latter group got out of the law school experience. And I tell people that all the time who are rushing to go to graduate school after undergrad. Breathe, go get some experience, and then go in. It's like such important material that I hope people listen to and take away from that.
We can even back it up earlier than that, because for whatever reason, I think I read it somewhere, I had gotten the bug that I wanted to finish college by 19.
Oh my God, okay.
And there was someone who had been bragging about it, I think probably in something that I was reading and stuff. I was going to be graduating high school at 16, just before I turned 17. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, the 3-year plan for me to get through college really quickly.
Wow.
And so as I'm graduating from ULA, this is still April, right before graduation, I was going to rush to Penn and then be able to figure out the best way to be able to get through there while doing engineering.
Yeah.
I got a call or a request from the head of ULA, Rabbi Shalom Temler.
Yeah.
Can you come meet me in my office? Okay, you get called to the principal's office. What's this about? He looks me in the eye and he says, Noam, you're going to Israel. I was like, okay, Rebbe, where am I going?
Yeah.
And that was I've been thinking about putting together like a talk about the one-liners that changed my life.
Right.
And so that'll be one of them. And essentially what he was doing was he was slowing me down a bit to build a better foundation. And during my time in Israel, I also came to appreciate how it's better, far better, to do things right than to do them fast. And I had been in the fast mode. I had been in the get this done with a ticking clock as my background.
Yeah.
And instead, I went from that 3-year plan to 6 years between the one for Israel and the 5 at Penn. So much for my planning and God laughing at the plan and telling me, no, that's not the right way to do it.
Right.
And so I definitely agree, like even going back to that point. And now we're having students be able to appreciate, say in college, and we can even back up, into high school and everything, that right now you're building your foundation for the decades of life. Better do it right than to do it fast.
Right.
Invest the time in it. Be able to also tune into all the different skills. Just like I was going to rush into engineering and never tune into business, my life would have been a little bit different if I hadn't been able to slow down and be able to explore the business side of it.
Yeah.
And so you never know if you're developing your right bicep, you might actually have your left bicep, if you can get it strong to also. You'll be able to lift heavier boxes, you'll be able to do cooler things, you'll be able to have a lot more of the impact on the world that you want to have if you're not rushing through these things, if you'll explore, if you'll find the best match for the can and the need, and also the want, your passion, your capabilities, and what is needed out there in the world. And so that was one of the key ones that I had, grab me by the lapels and say, hold on, this is not the right set of priorities that you have.
Beautiful. And that alludes to the other point you made around kind of what I'll call productive discomfort, this idea of choosing a business school that did not speak to your comfort zone and saying, I'm usually not the one in the middle, hands-on, and now I want to push it. I think that's a beautiful kind of lesson there as well. And then this other big theme that you kind of weave through the whole thing was this sense of letting things happen, not getting frustrated. Wow, I'm going to be in this city for 2 more years, or I was not expecting that, but I guess I'm going here. Another really hard thing when people are very focused on kind of sometimes wrapping their hands around their life and really controlling each step and allowing it to unfold. Very inspiring.
Yeah, and when the unexpected comes, figure out a way how this is going to get to be even better than what you thought was what you wanted to do.
Right. Beautiful. And maybe that leads to my first question, which is, I know you've done a ton of research on entrepreneurship and founders. I know you've written books on it, but give me some high level, what are the lessons that you've learned from your work studying and understanding founders and entrepreneurs?
Sure. So some of it we've already covered. A little bit of slow down and think before you just follow instinct and the gut. We tend to...
Especially for a founder, because you're going 100 miles an hour, you're burning money, you want to be successful as fast as possible. Sure. Keep going.
Yeah. No, we celebrate the instinctive entrepreneur. There are a lot of things that we have to be able to educate the entrepreneur about how to leverage that, but also harness it. To me, the best one-liner that I've heard from Steve Jobs, alav shalom, is follow your heart, but check it with your head. And what I've seen is is a recurring theme across all the research is, especially when it comes to the biggest reason for failure within startups. The biggest reason for failure within startups is the people side. People usually think it's the product market fit, there's all sorts of things on the finance, other things like that. Someone who became like a key mentor and colleague of mine at Harvard Business School, Bill Salmon, had done some research on what are the biggest reasons for failure. An economist who was expecting those kind of answers, the product market fit and other things like that. Bill found that 65% of the reasons for failure were the people problems. The tensions between the co-founders, the friction between them and the people hired to complement them and things like that. In Jewish terms, it was the ben adam lachavero that was what was bringing them down, the interpersonal and the problems with that. When I was just talking to Ramaz's second graders recently, we talked about that the biggest reason for failure is the ben adam lachavero.
Yeah.
Where do you learn how to be able to do it better? Great answers that the students were coming up with. In class, on the playground, etc. Like those kinds of things are the ones that are neglected too much when we're following the gut and rushing through things. And you have to be able to pull back on the reins and know what are the key forks in the road where you're going to be making a fateful decision. You might not even realize it at that point. You might also just think there's one option when you're making that decision about the people to involve, how to involve them, and other things like that. And so being able to educate the founders about this is a particular point where you have to inject in the head. We have to be able to pull back on the reins, think a little bit more about these fundamental principles that we can teach you, think a little bit more about the path ahead in the longer term, and not just the right now, the short term that you're facing. And so that is one of the key recurring themes on the way to it. Our natural biases that lead us in the direction of heightening risk rather than heightening the potential and how we're going to be able to get to it.
Right. what are the biases that it's just going with the gut, or it's hiring
So that's
friends,
one of them.
family? Like,
well, we can break down each of the steps along the way. One of them is not thinking deeply enough about, is it for me to be founding, and is it for this stage of my life? And so that's within the mind of the core founder. Then you get into, okay, it's for me and it's right timing. How should I do it?
Yeah.
Should I be doing it solo, or should I be doing it with other people?
Yeah.
If I'm going to do it with other people, who should they be?
Right.
This is all I encapsulate into what I call the 3 R's.
Okay.
The key decisions that you're going to face once you decide to do it. The 3 R's are the relationships, the roles and decision making, and the rewards. And so who am I going to tap? Is it the best thing to do it? Your best friend, or to co-found with mom? People you know really well. The people who you have like that deep social tie with, or is that the worst thing in the world for you to be doing? And this is also one of the key things that I found is that you see a lot of people on each side of that divide who are arguing, no, this worked great for me. It was magic that I did it with my brother. Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple with Steve Jobs. What could be better than to co-found with your best friend?
Yeah.
And then they end up at each other's necks, et cetera.
Right.
And so when it comes to those, what are the things that I had to do to be able to really say in a definitive way, right decision or wrong decision, is collect data. Like a radical concept. Let's see what the data say about it. And ended up collecting data on, for the initial book that you were talking about, The Founder's Dilemmas, 10,000 founders.
Wow.
To be able to understand their backgrounds and how they came together with the team, how did they make decisions early on, tie that into outcome measures, growth within the venture, success at finishing product development, whether the founder was able to remain CEO, et cetera, being able to tie it to all of those. And that's where we can put some definitive analyses to it and be able to say in a rigorous way, what are the ways in which you have to be able to check the gut and be able to make sure that you're injecting the head around there. So that's in terms of the relationships part of it. The roles in decision making. How are we going to make decisions collectively as a team?
Sure.
Should this be decisions by consensus? One founder, one vote, everyone has the same say in it? Or is that the worst thing that you could be doing? Usually founders punt on the difficult discussion with their best friend about who's going to be the CEO. Wait, I'm going to be working for you? When we disagree, you're the one who makes the call. Or vice versa, thrusting it onto the other person. Is it good to be co-CEOs and punt on it to avoid the decisions or not? The rewards, the third of the R's, is around a lot of it, the financial rewards. How are we going to allocate those within the team?
Right.
And a recurring theme is that the most common decisions that founders are making in each of these are the most ill-fated. So who they are co-founding with on the relationship side, how they are doing the roles and decision making, how they're doing the rewards, the natural inclination misleads you and actually is problematic. So that's where you have to have them pull back on the reins even more so if what they're interested in is impact on the world and not heightening the failure within what they're heading into.
Wow. Amazing. All right, that's a lot to take in there, and I think
that's the semester worth course.
Yeah, exactly. We got it in 5 minutes there, or 3 minutes there. So tell me, you alluded to this a little bit before, but maybe go a little bit deeper now. Your ability to look to Judaism to help inform the way you think about business. Let's start with that. I know there's lots of pieces of this puzzle, but let's start with that. You mentioned, 2,000 years of history that can help us shape how we think about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me just frame it first a little bit from
Please.
the YU perspective.
Yeah.
YU's famous tagline is Torah Umada. Torah and secular knowledge, however you want to be able to define that.
Right. There's a whole school of thought on the different versions of that.
Exactly. I've actually avoided the religious war, if you will, over what Torah Umada means.
Right.
But if you think about Torah Umada, what is the most important letter in Torah Umada?
Okay. You're asking me. I'm assuming you're going to say the U. Yes. All right.
Okay.
See.
The U, the and in between
the U,
the two
as
of
they
them.
say in the university world. The U.
Yes.
But U,
exactly.
Yeah.
And the critical thing is that oftentimes what we do is we compartmentalize our parts of life. So there's the Torah part. There's the Mada, the secular part. And one of the critical things is how do we bring the two of them together? When we are in the workplace, a lot of the uniqueness that we bring to it, in addition to like really strong skills and competence and things like that, dedication, is the U of being able to reach back to our Torah side when we were learning Talmud for 20 years of our life. How can we bring that into how we think in business differently than everyone who wasn't doing those 20 years worth of it? When we know a bunch of the Jewish values that we have been raised with, how does that shape our ethical decision-making within the workplace, et cetera? A bunch of ways in which that ooh should be that we bring the 2,000 years worth of the wisdom from the Talmud into the workplace and the other things that we bring intangibly into it. And then also in the other direction, the ooh works in both directions. How can we, when we are learning Torah, be able to bring our knowledge of the real world, of the business world, of whatever domain that we're in, to see nuances that are actually fundamental, important things for us to be able to tune into? How does it shape the way that we should be seeing things in our learning that otherwise we wouldn't be able to tell? And so, for instance, right now, you are learning, but a decade from now, you're going to be different. You will have experienced a whole bunch of things in the world. You learn the same exact thing, you should be seeing it in a very different way and being able to tune into things that you missed the first time through. And so within YU, we try to make sure that the students understand that there should not be this divide. Morning, you're doing Torah. Afternoon, you're doing Syms.
Right.
But have you look at the Torah in a different way because of what you learned in your business law class, in your dealing with difficult people class, in your marketing class even, strategy class, all of that, bring it into the base medrash and bring it into your Torah learning, and vice versa. How do we prepare you to be in the workplace, being able to bring the values and being able to bring that mindset to be able to do that? And so we created a part of the curriculum around that. A lot of the ways in which we try to instill that kind of a mindset in the students to be able to bring the two of them together. So that's like in terms of the overall like big picture framing around it, the criticality of the ooh, for us to be able to bring the two of them together. When it comes to me and how it shaped me looking at founders and stuff, I can give you a couple of microcosms from my Founders Dilemmas course at HBS.
Love microcosms.
So first day of it, when we're taking a look at founding teams, we actually started, the case study that I wrote for that one is about the founding team of Apple.
Okay.
And so it's about Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak. That's where Wozniak's classic line about what could be better than to go found with your best friend, and then it goes awry. But when we were doing the analysis around understanding that team, we're starting to get into the dynamics between the two of them. And I had been shaped by the founding team of the world in the Torah. So who's the founding team of the world?
Avram and Sarah, or Adam and Eve?
Okay, so the founding team of the nation is definitely Avram and Sarah.
Yeah.
Adam and Eve, founding team of the world.
Great.
And the Torah gives us a golden two-word encapsulation of what their relationship should be. So does that...
Ezer Kenegdo.
Perfect.
Great. All right.
Okay, you're right on top of it.
I came prepared today, I guess. Here we go.
Ready for the cold calling.
Exactly. I feel like I'm back at Harvard here. It's like a Socratic method. That's great.
In the classroom, I would be bringing this in, essentially. Right. Okay. I would hit the pause button on the case discussion.
It's amazing.
And I would say, are there any Bible fans here?
Yeah.
And usually be some really good Christians there who would have it at their fingertips.
Right.
Say, does anyone know who the founding team of the world is? Adam and Eve.
There you go.
This is where we break down a little bit. Does anyone know what the two-word encapsulation is?
Right.
But we would get into Ezer Kenegdo. Literally, it means a helper against you.
Sure.
What do we make of this? It seems to be an oxymoron. It seems to be a paradox of how you could have that. And we get into implicitly, when I'm teaching it, say at YU and other places, like teaching it for like Jewish audiences, I will get explicit about this, but there's a disagreement between the all-time greatest biblical commentator, Rashi, about what Ezer Kenegdo means, and much more recently, a couple hundred years ago, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, who was a major Rosh Yeshiva in Europe, at Theive, about what he says each of them mean. And what Rashi captures is the natural human inclination. Rashi says, based on the Gemara, he's quoting Rabbi Elazar from the Gemara, that when you are meriting it, you will get the support. When you don't merit it, you'll get the pushback. And to me, that captures a lot, that human inclination when we get criticism, that we recoil from it. Woe is me, I wasn't worthy of getting support. You're in a performance review, and you hear the negative side of it.
Sure.
Woe is me and all sorts of regrets is what is our natural inclination. It's the descriptive of human nature. That is what Rashi is saying to me. The Netziv said, no, Rashi, you're looking at this wrong. The kenegdo, the pushback, is the ezer, is the help. This person is going out of their way to do something that no one else has been willing to do. Tell you where you are falling short of your potential, where you can have even greater impact, where you have some things you have to work on. And rather than recoiling from it, we have to reprogram ourselves to say thank you for that. You are being my ezer, you are helping me be able to get even better in the things that I am trying to do. And to me, the Netziv is the prescriptive to complement Rashi's descriptive of how we have to take the recoil and instead get ourselves to be able to say, thank you for that, and how can we get better from it? And so we use that lens to take a look at the founding teams. How well are they doing? One of my students, Jessica Alter, when she graduated from HBS, she created a startup called Co-Founder Dating, to be able to apply a bunch of these concepts.
That's cool.
And be able to use it in it. And she wrote a prominent blog post. There's a prominent entrepreneurship blogger named Steve Blank who featured on his post. And she wrote that one of the key things that founders have to learn is how to fight well. Like to me, those two words resonate and capture really well the Ezer Kenegdo piece of it.
Wow. And
building the difficult conversation muscles, being able to hold each other to the higher standard than just papering over everything you co-found with your best friend or with mom. Are you going to be willing to push back on them? Are you going to be willing to have the difficult conversations? Well, this is one of the key things that when you're doing it with them, you have to be able to build that. And so it shaped how I look at founding teams. I was able to bring it into the classroom and have the students be able to benefit from that to the Rashi 1,000 years ago and the Theive 200 years ago. Be able to benefit from that lens because it shaped how I look at those founding teams. And to me, it's a great example of the ooh and the going back and forth between them. The other microcosm is the final day of the semester. We were getting into entrepreneurial failure and the building of resilience and how to be able to get back on the horse after you get thrown from the horse and other things along those lines. The case study for that day was about someone named Rabbi Akiva.
Amazing. By the way, when I first looked you up when I was preparing the interview, I remember seeing, I think you were guest lecturing at Stanford, and you're like wearing a kippah in a packed room. And I just thought that alone, I was like, this is amazing. This guy's wearing a kippah, walking around a room teaching at Stanford, and all these kids are eating it up. And now it's like, by the way, not only that, but my case study was Rabbi Akiva. That's amazing, amazing. Keep going. I love it. All right.
No, so we got into Rabbi Akiva across the Talmud is the best example of that entrepreneurial resilience. About being able to see a setback and be able to get stronger from it. It turns out that we credit a lot of times two other great rabbis as being his teachers, but the Gemara actually tells us that his longest teacher for 22 years was someone named Nachum Ish Gamzu. What he was known for is what we call in Hebrew the Gamzula Tova. This should also become for the better. And there's a bunch of stories about Nachum Ish Gamzu being able to take setbacks and be able to get stronger from it. He developed in his students, including Rabbi Akiva, that resilience. And Rabbi Akiva, in the Talmud in Brachos, the 60th page of Brachos ends with a famous story about Rabbi Akiva trying to get to a town in dangerous times. Just as night is coming and not being able to get a place there. Woe is me. It would be our recoil at that. I'm going to be stranded outside of town in dangerous times. But Rabbi Akiva said, essentially, Gamzla Tova, hang in there. We should persist through this. He goes, pitches his tent outside of town. But at least I have my donkey, for transportation and companionship. At least I have my candle that I can light. And then, lo and behold, a wild animal comes, kills his donkey. For us, that would be woe is me. Forget the companionship. I don't even have transportation that I'm going to be able to do or anything like that. But Rabbi Akiva, Gamzula Tova. The wind picks up, blows out his candle. Pitch black right now. Woe is me. But Rabbi Akiva, Gamzula Tova. He had been trained and ingrained about how to be able to take these setbacks and be able to handle them in a very different way. Lo and behold, he gets himself through the night. The sun comes up, he looks down on the town that had been his dream, his wish to be able to stay there, and had been attacked overnight. That's when he realized that would have been me if that would have happened. And say my donkey had brayed, they would have attacked me. Say they had seen my candle in the darkness, that would have been me. And so now we had the appreciation of the Gamzla Tova part of it. And so that last day, we'd be talking about that piece, but then we'd go beyond it. There's some of the things from my studying founders who were able to get back on after the failure that I saw very much resonate with me about a more proactive approach to Gamzla Tova than Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is remarkable. Like the emunah, the faith that he had to be able to stay in the game and things like that. I can't get to that level of emunah or anything like that. I don't know that there are too many people these days who can. And so to me, it's more important that we find a way to make it a Gamzla Tova, not just sit back and wait for Hashem to make it into a Gamzla Tova. How can we partner with Hashem to make it a Gamzla Tova? And that's what I had observed from a bunch of the founders. how do I set myself up that if I fail, I'm going to be able to learn from it. I'm going to get stronger from it.
Sure.
One of the best examples that I found was actually a tweet that Rav Aryeh Leibowitz, who's the head of the Smicha program, a close colleague of mine at YU had. He was quoting essentially the founder of Eish HaTorah, which is like a world-changing organization.
Sure.
Like the Jewish people are far stronger because of having Eish HaTorah out there.
Sure.
The tweet was along the lines, I don't remember the exact framing or phrasing of it or anything like that, but essentially, my failures were the criticality to my success. What did that mean? I actually got from the CEO of Eish, Rabbi Stephen Berg. I asked him, how can I learn more about Rabbi Noach Weinberg, the founder, and the things that he went through. He sent me a biography that Yonason Rosenblum wrote about him, and turns out that he had failed 4 or 5 times in trying to start new organizations before Eish.
Wow.
And what he was saying was, the critical thing was my learning from those failures on the way to creating a world. Think about how much poorer we as a Jewish people would be if Eish had not been founded.
Right.
If after the 3rd or 4th failure he had thrown in the towel and hadn't said, okay, this is not for me, I'm not going to continue or anything like that. And so the same way in which we have to set ourselves up to be able to proactively learn, be able to take the failures, to think in a different way, be able to see when God laughs at our plan, about how he is showing us that there's actually a better way to go down each of those directions. That is the key thing that we were driving home in the last day of class in HBS, and have them understand a little bit more about how to take a different view than our natural inclination would be around that. I would have students walking out the door, non-Jewish students, saying Gamza Latova that day. I still get updates from one of my dearest students, Dilip Rao from India. He sends me his Gamza Latova updates on his founding problems when he hits a setback and things like that.
Amazing.
And so it shaped my thinking about it. It helps us shape the next generation, but it's where we can be able to bring together the being able to see the wisdom of all of these thousands of years. The Chazal, the rabbis, understood human psyche wonderfully. Their insights into it are timeless. They still apply in 2025. They will apply in 3025. There's all sorts of ways if we can tap that, we can learn about it, and then be able to bring it into our lives, we'll be even more richer for it.
Beautiful. Just so many reflections. One, I'll say, I remember really thinking through this question. It was around the time I was becoming a rabbi and applying for a Wexner fellowship. Really the question in my mind was, what does it mean to be, like I was a lawyer at the time, a Jewish lawyer as opposed to a lawyer, if that makes sense, because I felt like there was this compartmentalization, kind of like you went to pray in the morning or to study Torah in the morning, and then you checked your Judaism at the door, and then you walked into your big law firm, and then there was a culture and a way of living and a way of being there that you like put on that hat, and then maybe you snuck out for afternoon services and went back to being Jewish, and then you went back to being a lawyer. And this to me felt like this weird dichotomy that didn't make sense. And I hear you saying that at minimum, we should be bringing a Jewish lens to be more successful in our business work, and we could be bringing lessons from the business world to be more successful in our Jewish work. And that latter piece also, I'm a Musar guy, Rav Salanter writes about that as well. Like we should be using, if we develop, behavioral techniques in our business world, we know how to plan for a big important meeting, how can we use those skills to plan for a big important encounter with our family at home to make sure we're acting in an ethical and thoughtful way. So it totally resonates deeply. I'll add, I won't ask of you, but I'll just add that I think another piece here is also not only how do we bring our Jewish lens to the business world and how do we bring our business lens to the Jewish world, but also zooming out for that larger mission piece of it as well. This idea of like, okay, well, and I don't know that it's a simple answer. It's something I argue with my friends a lot about. We fight well, I guess. We're good Ezer Konegdos, which is business a means to an end, right? Is the idea that like we want to be successful so that, we can do, I don't know, use the money to build a new synagogue, or use the money to support our troops in Israel, or use the money to build a home where we can host Shabbat meals and encourage other people to join, that kind of thing. And how do we be careful around like keeping our eye on that ball, because there can be a mindset that's kind of like more money, more money, more money, and there could also be a mindset of like the goal is to just make sure that my kids have access to the same delights of the world that I do, and suddenly you're losing the Jewish lens where it comes to not only how you treat others, but also how you think about the world more globally.
Yeah. No, in terms of like the broader mission part of it, this is actually one thing, we can frame it from the perspective of like the Syms mission. The mission that we created now 5-6 years ago, I think captures, both the balance that you're talking about and also the integration that we've been discussing. What we set as the mission for Syms is that we are going to develop Torah-grounded professionals who excel in the workplace and in the community. And so how to be Torah grounded in the workplace, how to have it rise to the level of excellence, but how to not just be limiting it to the workplace, but also to the community.
Beautiful.
And when YU was interviewing like the deans and things like that, back when I was, when they're looking for it to fill the job, the talk that I gave to the Syms faculty and the other people who were coming to it was what I called the 24 hours of our students. Usually in schools, what they focus on, Penn did this really well, prepares for the workplace, the 9 to 5 of life. How are you going to be able to excel when you walk in those doors, and then when you exit, then something else happens, but we're not going to tell you what's going to happen.
Right.
One of the things that I love at YU and about Jewish education more generally is we see it as the 5 p.m. to the 9 a.m. is often some of the most important things that are going on. And so we have to be able to have the scope of what we're doing being the 24 hours of the student. And so how do we help them understand how to take their organizational skills and translate it into impact on the community? How do we even be able to develop in them the ability to have a family and that they're going to be able to parent well, that they're going to be able to think more differently about? So I Syms, we just debuted a course this past semester in personal finance. Something that almost no business school tackles.
It's amazing.
I did finance at Wharton.
No, any school tackles.
Yes. I did finance at Wharton.
Yeah.
Despite that, when you got married, you had money to, from the wedding and things like that, I had no idea how to pick a mutual fund for myself.
Right.
Because that's the personal side. That's the 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. part of it. And so now we're trying to tackle that head on.
Wharton grad is, what do I do with this?
Exactly. I know exactly what to do when I walk into work.
Right.
But when it comes to the home, when it comes to planning the budget for the next decade of life, when it comes to investing the money for being able to do it for myself, and things like that. That's what it is. And so that's why we have to be able to have the ooh happen at all of those different levels. And so to the extent that we have even, the communal, the family as being part of the mission, in addition to the excel in the workplace, and in the workplace, how do we drive home to them, how to be Torah grounded, how to be able to set the rules of the game and be able to pick the right career that is going to be able to be aligned with our values rather than conflicting with it. That's some of the intentionality that we have to bring to their education and the thinking that we're able to give them as they're planning those next stages of their life.
Beautiful. So I want to get specific a little bit more there because you mentioned, you've had multiple kind of dual track moments of your life. And I think, M&T at Penn tries to integrate those in some ways. We'll get to Ramaz in a second, but before we even get there at YU, as you mentioned, kind of one might have the mindset they have their kind of Torah classes and their business classes, that kind of thing. So practically speaking, is that integration kind of don't forget to bring your hat from here to there? Or are there specific classes where you have a rabbi and business? How do you do that practically?
So it's the latter of them. Well, it's all of it. But the most unique of the things that we've done over the last few years is to bring together a brand new part of the curriculum, something we call our Jewish values curriculum. To me, it's the ooh that had been missing until then. In those classes, we have one required course. In fact, we have 4 courses in it. 3 out of the 4 are required for the students to take, and then the 4th is an elective lane that they can be able to choose from a variety of them. And it's essentially the mission that I was describing to you brought front and center for the students. So for instance, the excelling in the community part of it, we have a course that was developed by someone named Rav David Bashevkin, who is essentially called Jewish Public Policy. How do you think at a policy level about communal issues? Not just within yourself, what's best for you, but how to be able to contribute by essentially thinking at the level of a board member of a shul, of a school, of a tzedakah organization, how to be able to do things that are much more beyond what is our natural instinct, because the future of these students is for them to be contributing, osek b'tzarchei tzibur, contributing to the community by being involved in that. And so that's one of the key pieces that comes right from the mission. The Torah grounded in the workplace is another required course, something called Practical Workplace Halacha. Someone named Ari Wasserman, who wrote the best-selling book on workplace halacha, is the one who developed it and teaches it for us.
I love that.
And it's essentially of the students. I had a bunch of rude awakenings when I came into the workplace. That's what all of us of our generation had.
Yeah.
We're not ready for our biggest client has a major deadline at 12 noon on Shabbos.
Right.
What do you mean you're not going to be here?
Yeah.
What do you mean that you're not going to be? But you can make an exception for our biggest client, right?
Right.
Well, how do you get ready for that? Usually, when those kinds of things come up, there's that. There's the kosher in the workplace problems. There's the should I wear my yarmulke in the workplace?
Right.
A whole bunch of other things that were the rude awakenings that we had. How can we get intentional about preparing our students for those?
Sure.
So that it's not deer in the headlights when you get hit by one of them.
Right.
Mind racing. I don't know how to answer this. I don't know what to do at this point. It'll become a random walk through halacha.
Right.
The worst thing for you to do when you hit these is to be inconsistent.
Right.
And so how do you send the clear signals about it?
Right.
And so preparing the students for all of those, how do they understand what does halacha say about it? Where's their flexibility, but where are their red lines?
Right.
Who are the role models who face this and came up with some solutions for it? And so within Practical Workplace Halacha, we have all of that coming together. Ari he actually went to Harvard Law, worked Sullivan and Cromwell, like had a classic thing, went to the corporate direction. And then now he's been learning Torah, teaching Torah, and writing about it for a couple of decades.
Sure.
So when you were talking about like the types of people that are able to do it, people who bring the corporate experience and the rabbinic quals all together is the people that we have teaching in that curriculum to be able to have a front and center rather than just leaving it to the students to knit this together and be able to see the ways that they are going to be able to make it happen.
I love that, and I'll just add to your piece. You gave some examples of kind of like for a typical Orthodox Jew, those challenges, but we don't have to discuss it now, but you could zoom out and imagine more broadly, even for someone who doesn't necessarily have those same halachic challenges in their workspace, how do they bring their Jewish identity more broadly, beyond kind of like what are my behavioral techniques that reflect Judaism, but also how do I be proudly Jewish and work. But I want to pause there because I want to make sure we spend a little bit of time on the moment that we're in right now, which is you stepping into this very exciting role for both you and for the Ramaz community to be head of school. We got 10 minutes to further discuss. Tell me a little bit about it. There's a lot of questions there, but how are you talked about bringing Rabbi Akiva into a class in Harvard, which I love, and this idea of doing this Torah Mada or Torah business at YU. What excites you about the Ramaz opportunity? What are you hoping to bring there, the impact you hope to have? I know you haven't even started yet, but let's hear about it.
5 months away from starting.
Yeah, exactly.
So essentially have the luxury of a long lead time to be able to absorb from the teachers, absorb from the parents and everyone else there, from the students.
The listening tour.
Exactly. One of the things that's exciting is those people. The people who are involved in the school, as I was getting to know it over the summer and everything, remarkable people. All bring some major stuff to the table. There's key things that we drive into part of our values of Lomed Mikol Adam.
Yeah.
And
learn from every person. Yeah.
Exactly. I learned something from every single one of them that I was meeting at that point. And I could also see right now I have a document with 81 single-space notes that I had, a Word doc of everything that I've accumulated from it. I'm sure there's another 81 that I
81 pages
will be able to get for the next 5 months of learning from everyone. And then once I come on board, even more so, that there's a lot to be able to gain from their insights, their new ideas, and a bunch of the innovations they already have there that maybe we can spread it to the other two divisions, from this gem that you developed here and be able to bring it to there. And so that's one of the key things, the beacon of Jewish education that Ramaz has long been. Very exciting piece to be able to also be able to work with the people there to be able to really set the tone for the next stage of it. Like right now we're at a key inflection point. October 7th, kind of like putting an exclamation point on it. Things on college campuses, Ramaz has had the most remarkable track record at getting their students into the top colleges. What is the future of that?
Right.
Are there ways in which we have to prepare them differently for that?
Sure.
Are there ways in which we have to rethink the fundamentals of education, not just for Ramaz, but also more broadly for every other modern Orthodox school and the students that they're turning out? And so how to be able to think about the innovation side of curricular preparation, being able to have the students be armed for the next stage of what they're going off to.
Right.
And so that's one of the other key things of being able to do it at Ramaz and then be able to see what communally we might be able to, as a klal, be able to benefit from that. A bunch of things that as I was getting to know the challenges of Ramaz, it was mapping to, when I would reflect on the stuff that I've loved at Syms, the same kind of things that we can be able to bring to Ramaz. Three major buckets of things, at least how I think about it at Syms and going forward with Ramaz. There's first the organizational leadership bucket, there's the educational leadership bucket, and then there's the communal leadership bucket. And we've hit on a variety of these things already along the way there. Those are the kinds of things that I very much look forward to being able to learn from everyone about what are the things that are the needs and the way we can work together on being able to tackle all those things in those three buckets. Another one of the things that I found very exciting is I got some insights into how language pre-shapes our biases.
Okay.
When Ramaz first approached me, the phrase that I used with the co-chair of the board, with Erica Schwartz, was the one thing I'm going to have to grapple with, despite all those other exciting things, is this moving down a weight class? And that when we refer to higher ed, that implies higher is better.
Yes.
What it brought me back to, after I thought about it a little bit, is something I remember my second year when I was on the faculty at HBS. I saw a story back in 2004 about a venture capitalist who had reached the top of that profession. So he was in the most prominent and best of the venture capital firms, Kleiner Perkins.
Okay.
At 30, he had reached general partner status. That's like the promised land that everyone else is dreaming about there.
Sure.
He did it for 14 years. And then in 2004, he resigned from Kleiner Perkins. Everyone's dream job that he's giving up.
Right.
To do what? To become a 7th grade math teacher.
Wow.
And he talked about, if I can be able to be there at that formative stage of their life, teaching them a critical life skill, that's the impact that I want to be having. I'm getting chills now just talking about that
amazing.
quote that really impacted me all the way back then. And so that's where I started thinking about it as more of the earlier ed, rather than higher ed, lower ed, things like that. It's the earlier ed when developmental stages are much more open to being able to shape them. The clay is softer at that point. When it comes to the head and the heart, that we can do a whole bunch of things to be able to set those next decades of life on that trajectory. And so to me, that's also part of the exciting part of being able to be able to come into Ramaz at all of those different stages, N through 12. How can we think about forming on both the head and the heart side? Like the academic side, Ramaz is phenomenal. Being able to have like the excellence built into that. Can we then complement that also with the heart side? Being able to build in the feel for Judaism. Being able to have the ruach side, what you were helping to be able to drive home there.
Sure.
There's some gems that are already there. I just experienced it a week ago. Rabbi Steven Eisenberg had a brainchild, I think a year or two ago, that when the kids in 2nd grade get their Chumash, get their Bible, they kind of like mark it. They have like an important, milestone for them.
Sure.
But what he added onto it is let's now take the kids up to Yeshiva University to get a blessing from the two of the biggest rabbis of the generation, Rav Herschel Schachter and Rav Mordechai Willig, and be able to have them see in some ways the end target of what they're getting to, let them be in the YU base medrash, where you have all the college students who are learning and things like that. And so he brought them up to YU last week, and some golden pictures and video that we have of them experiencing right there in the base medrash, the middle of morning Seder, hundreds of guys learning there with Rav Herschel Schachter, the Gadol Hador, the greatest rabbi of the generation, shaking their hands, wishing them a mazel tov, wishing them on their best, and the kids being able to feel the ruach side of Yiddishkeit, and being able to have that be able to complement with the heart side, with the head and things like that. I had I merited being able to speak to them, talk to them a little bit about is this just in 2nd grade that you're using your Chumash? No, it's for life. They already know. They had great answers to a whole bunch of the questions that we had there. And also we were able to sing a song together, Achenu. That is, I asked ahead of time, what is their favorite song? And we ended up bringing a lot more of the Ruach, bringing a lot of the Spirit, as they're also learning about the Torah stories and a lot of the other things that they're able to get out of that side of it. And so Ramaz being able to become like that beacon of head and heart. I guess this goes back to Steve Jobs in some ways. That's a bunch of those are the exciting things for me.
Beautiful. And you raised an interesting point that I just want to pull out, which is a longer discussion, but I still want to name it, which is, most of our discussion was about how do you bring a Jewish lens to the workplace or the workplace to the Jewish lens. And there's a whole post-October 7th question, which is like the word Israel, right? Because it's like, it used to, it might have been I'm the only one who's kosher at my place of work, or this is how people do things at my job, but given my Jewish values, I want to behave this way at my job. And now there's a different thing, which is, I want to be pro-Israel, and there's pushback at work because of, people are protesting. So I think that's a whole other thing in terms of preparing them. But I guess my hope would be, not that you're asking my advice, is that we can, think about that.
Taking it down.
There you go. Think about, as you think about applying what you did at YU to these students, right, where they can, take their Jewish lens and bring it to all these, great colleges they're getting into, and they're, the best chess player and the best physicist and all those things coming out of Ramaz. They can bring certainly the Jewish lens and also the Israel lens. They'll need both of those, I guess, as piece of it.
One of the wonderful building blocks already at Ramaz is the decades-long affinity for Israel.
Mm-hmm.
The Zionist bone that is very strong within the school, being able to build on it to the next generation. This is where I see it as building on excellence.
Right.
There's already the excellence there. How do we take the gems and then be able to enhance them and be able to translate them into the next stage of the development, the post-October 7th on the Israel side, a variety of the other things that are great stuff there. How can we be able to magnify it, enrich it, and spread it across all of the rest of the school and beyond to the other parts of the community?
Beautiful. And I think, and that other piece that you've mentioned a lot is also the integration piece. That feels so core from what I'm hearing you, which is that you can have excellence in Judaics and excellence in secular, but how do you create a culture where those things are really in conversation? Even as you did at YU, how do you create dedicated class time where you're really trying to help people do that? And I know that interdisciplinary work is very popular in the education space in general, and how do you do that well here, I think is beautiful. All right, I just want to close by saying so excited for Ramaz, so excited for you. May this be Gamzula Tova in all the ways, not in terms of an apparent setback, but in terms of something that we will look back on and recognize how good it is.
May it go may chayil chayil.
Yeah,
that would be
even better.
It's
even
already
better.
strong, and how can we get it to be stronger?
Excellent. All right, wonderful. I mentioned the books before. I have Life as a Startup here. This is the skinnier version, and I'm certainly going to be using this, God willing, without making a net or a promise this weekend's Zemer of the week. Dr. Noam Wasserman, thank you so much.
Thank you, Justin, for not just a lot of fun over the last hour, but for everything you do for the community. Being able to bring this knowledge, the Torah insights, and other ways in which how do we bring the real world, the current modern world into it and back and forth. Thank you for everything you contribute.
Amazing. All right. Excited to see what happens at Ramaz. Here we go.
Likewise.
Ay, ay, ay,